We acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, which include the Ottawa, Ojibwe, the Potawatomi nations collectively, known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We also acknowledge the Wendat Nation, Giron, who occupied these lands prior to the middle of the 17th century. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous people on this land. We are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. So welcome everybody to our October 13th Spooky Word Up. We're doing a horror and paranormal writers panel. So in the spirit of the month, we're joined by two horror authors, Tony Burgess, who's been described as a literary experimental horror writer, and his films as grindhouse comedy. And Sephera, I should ask you.
Sephera.
Sephera Giron?
Giron.
Giron.
Sephera Giron.
Yes. Should have known that. Still the great
okay.
She's published over 20 books. She teaches, and she can read your tarot cards. So each can introduce themselves. I think ladies first.
Oh, okay. So, I'm Sephera, and I write horror mostly, and I teach at I teach creative writing and how to write a novel at Georgetown College these days. And an exciting thing that recently happened to me was I was a finalist in a screenwriting contest, so I got to go to Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama, in August for the Stowe Story Labs, which was an intensive screenwriting program. And it was at the same time as the Sidewalk Film Festival, which has been running for a couple of decades. So that was a really exciting summer for me to do these new and interesting things. And yeah, I can turn the sound off my phone, should be good too. And I wrote my very first interactive novel, and it's a horror novel called Let Us Burn on the Tales app you can get on your phone. And so I wrote the story and someone else designed all the interactive stuff. So that's coming out chapter by chapter. And so that was a new adventure for me and kind of weird, but kind of fun. I don't really know what else you want me to say, so I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Sephera. Hi, my name is Tony Burgess. I'm a writer of horror fiction and screenplays, mostly genre films and some sort of grindhousey exploitation slasher comedies, as well as other things. I started publishing fiction fairly late in life. I was in my 30s. I had, for the first half of my life, I was focused on drawing and painting and sculpture and things like that. And I kind of transferred a lot of those tools over to writing when I started writing, and published several novels with ECW, and then a bunch with a press that will not be named. And another one that, what is it? Anvil. And had some success early on writing screenplays. Not that I knew what I was doing, but I told people I did, and so they let me do it, which is that's how you start. And my second novel, Pontypool Changes Everything, was turned into a film by Bruce McDonald, the film Pontypool, and then after that, I got more. Jobs, so sort of hired gun, punching up scripts and sometimes writing original scripts, and was fortunate enough to see those, quite a number of them produced, which is very fortunate for anybody working in that industry. I'm a lucky man. I work with a group in Collingwood. I work with a group in Grimsby, in Hamilton, and I continue to grind these things out. And I just recently sort of reinvented for myself what writing fiction is about, because I struggled through the lockdown. with writing. I don't know if you did or not.
Well, because I'm usually a novelist, and so I thought I'm going to revisit my screenwriting roots because I went to
Yeah.
university. So I got back into screenwriting. So I
Right.
shifted. So I wrote a couple of TV pilots and a couple of feature
Great.
films. And
Yeah.
at some point I have to learn how to sell them. So.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing.
That's the other, but that's how I dealt with my writer's garbage during,
Yeah.
besides binge watching bazillions of documentaries on cults and serial killers.
Yes, that's not over yet. You know what I mean? There's more killing being done every day.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I found in the sort of the early dark days of the lockdown, when you didn't know what was going to happen, and you couldn't leave your house, and everything felt unending and unresolved, and you got into a state of mind, and I found this about 7 or 8 months into it, where I was having trouble thinking. And I was having trouble sleeping, and I was having trouble reading. It started with having a difficulty getting through a book, then I couldn't get through a page, and then I'd stare at sentences. And you find that you're just not concluding things intellectually or psychically. And I, in my reading about this, learned a new term. It's a Greek term, akidia. I think it is akidia. I don't know if the pronunciation is right. And it is spiritual boredom, the inability to conclude thoughts and emotions, and the inability to actually have them. So that once you've gone through boredom and sadness and melancholy, you're uninterested in them. And so you have nowhere to go.
Kind of describing my first year,
Well, and I thought that was very close to what I was experiencing. And so I thought, instead of writing I'm babbling now. Instead of writing like a COVID diary, I think a lot of people are probably started. And there's probably 1 million of them out there right now.
There were a lot of COVID movies at that film festival.
Was there? Yeah, so you got your COVID guy. And I mean, I think that there's probably only 7 stories that we cycle, right? It's I drank wine in my underwear for a year or whatever it is, right? And everybody has the same story. So I was
sourdough.
so I wasn't totally interested in that, and I was interested more in this sensation of incomplete thought, of being that burden thought. And so I set out to write a novel where every sentence is interrupted before it can complete.
Oh, cool.
And I managed to pump out a couple hundred pages of it. And I've got a sample of it here, just a little paragraph. And then the first actual attempt to write fiction came out of this sort of experiment. But it was wonderful. I mean, it was very, it felt like I had achieved the satisfaction that was not possible any other way. I had to break my thinking in order to start it up again.
Yeah, that's cool. You did it that way. Yeah, I did it.
Smart, you have to break the routine.
Break the routine and break the approach, and having to, I set up different resources, a visual encyclopedia, this or that, or reference material, conversation with my daughter sitting beside me doing her remote learning, and sat outside on the front deck and wrote automatic writing, and did not stop for 6 or 7 hours a day, and tried not to question what I was writing.
Right.
And so that I would have conversations, I would watch things online, and I would not stop writing. And it ended up being very, very interesting. And I was really happy to sort of rediscover, a new set of words.
And is that what you were pointing to, that book? Is that book?
No, this is the story that I eventually published as a story. It came on after the automatic novel, which I've got a sample of here, which I ended up managing to publish it in a few different places, which found some enthusiastic. Oh, yeah, this is these folks, I believe they're from Toronto. Great folks, and so I'll read just because I think it's interesting. I'll read a paragraph of the automata, and then a paragraph of the writing that it sort of came out of it to be more legible to your average reader. it's the
Okay.
the automatic. It's
Essential
not probably
process.
not legible, but it's my favorite thing. So
Cool.
I'll read that. Should I read it?
Yeah, read it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I want to hear
Might as
it.
well.
All right.
So read it
See, I'm
while
building it
you're
up now.
listening.
Wait a minute. Better be ready, Burgess. Okay, so I'm going to read it just as it is on the page, and I don't even know how to inflect things. I removed sort of figurative language, and whenever I found myself using a word like or as, I replaced it with the word such.
Oh,
So that instead of comparing something, I forced it through the thing. Such, it's sort of, it's instead of a ground and a figure, you've got to kind of train, pushing its way through the sentences, right? Such, okay. Winter stripped the caravan of options, and so teenagers set afire, wake up the water queens and filtered leaders. These teenagers, mostly mothers and fathers, burn quicker than the dead willow in hell, all green flecked eyes and hands speed tapping the emerald ember chest. Death this way in a storm made of breath, worse than most, hanging on just so the last toe, burning lights away, a hot Camaro of feet pulled inches ahead and then dropped as if we hadn't been there at the 4th birthday or later on even. You can listen and hear ice making houses in their calves, spotted droplets with funhouse virus against the wall of trees and the leaning in of quarry shears, hands across the fountain forehead, such the great apes, seeing from the side and hearing from afar, the schoolgirls collecting the sardine legs and Goliath eyes of their mates from all the fields of desiccated holiday. People are one thing, such hopscotch berries with tongues of blackbirds are one thing, such a stream of goalposts worried into the valley. Every startling place is plucking the eyes from every startling place, and so barking lakes of organ water, dim as diamonds, grow still, and if the summer was here, a place to never be allowed to see, my sacred bike, stolen from the physician, lies on a hit of sand, a white knoll, beside my barren lunch, got for pointing out who lives in the third house, and I'm stopped for now, to take all the refined chocolate and burnt sugar, filth up into my teeth to rest. The rays of light, such fake yellow cigars, burst behind the caregiver cheekbones that were broken to be here. An adult drapes the back of my arm across my drummed-in face, and the prone birch and drowned odalisque alert. This isn't where I was going to stay. Pillow cream drains out on my leather hips and bacon calves. I want to light the way, to be the light, but here again come the ferret escarpments, because the sleep of the sublands is full of regretful owls. I can't stay here. The moment rolls on the wheels of a medieval mechanical, Scotch marks in red rolling under the moment convey this to Oklahoma, where the sound of 500-year-old wheels that sported devils and even a Satan are now the primary family hybrid, tucked in red riders and slow rocking, zipping across the lagoon and the school. It's not possible to picture and follow as the thousands of tracks appear in Subcarpathia. That's that thing. I mean, to me, it makes sense to me. I can hear how it makes sense. Okay, so this was it was a day where I wanted to sort of articulate an emotion, because there's no the emotions in here are shattered, fragmented, right? So I wanted to sort of, and it was a rainy day, and I was just in that sort of state of mind, and so I wanted to write kind of excessive misery, and have it focus on and end of life. This is a paragraph from Reynald's Berries. One never dies on days like this. The white sign, Collingwood Marine Hospital, is a speckled egg. The roadway is a soggy cast of pasty screens. We take the ticket to park, and then we park. Tom-toms of rain on empty cars as we climb to the entrance. A woman smokes hard under the overhang, well inside the 30 meters prohibiting her. The door slides open for us. It sounds like a month of drizzle, and the stack of chairs just inside might as well be corpses. Health card. She is old in the way that anyone over 20 is today. Her hands are objects. One takes our card. Okay, what brings you here today? We push up our stiff hair. Ear infection. She looks, doesn't look. Our diabetic blood barely moves above our heart so that our mind has no air. Pain on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being unbearable, 10. Are we playing cribbage? Is this a sleeping game? Our temperature is soaring. Can she hear these kettles sizzling in rain? We think the pain must signal dying. Is that true? We can feel the stents in our heart today, little cinches in the expanding sausage. So I mean, it goes on in a kind of relentless physical misery. And that's body horror, right? That's, you know, so technically my horror is breathing. Really. So, you know, yeah, if I pull the odd vampire or zombie, they're just guests. Anyway, so that's that. Thank you for
Okay.
That's great. Great.
No, that was good. So what do you think it is about horror and frightening stories that appeals to people?
There's people come into horror many different ways because people like different things. For me, I always liked horror. I always likened it to an amusement park or something. Like it's a way to get extreme emotions, but you know you're going to get off the ride at some point. You know, like you go on a crazy roller coaster, you think you're going to die, but then you arrive safely. So you have all the ups and downs and heart attacks and stuff. And so I think people like horror because depending on what type of horror you like, because sometimes it enables you to confront the unspeakable or the unknowable. Sometimes, you know, you can literally just kill someone you hate. You know, it can be cathartic, it can be emotional, it can deal with themes you're trying to deal with in your own life. You know, people who are into vampires might really be lured in by eternal life, and so you never die, and they kind of like that idea. And then it's kind of grisly how you keep that eternal life. Yeah, I'm not sure why people come to horror, but I'm glad they do.
What do you think brought you to it?
Me, myself?
Yeah.
I'm a pretty dark person. When I was little, I would notice things like the very first poem I wrote when I was about 4 years old was about seeing all those squirrels on the side of the road with their heads squashed in. So it was a poem about a squirrel with his crushed skull, you know, because he didn't make it across the road trying to get his nuts, and, and it was a bloody mess. And I just kind of went from there. I used to really enjoy the old fairy tales, like, you know, everybody's going crazy with the Little Mermaid right now, but you know, some people are actually pulling out the original story saying, hey, you got worse things to worry about than what color the mermaid is. You know, it's like what the story is truly about, you know, changing yourself for a man. You know, but those old fairy tales, like my favorite ones were Goose Girl, Little Mermaid, One Eye, Two Eye, Three Eyes, and you know, these sorts of things where they were the real fairy tales. You know, Cinderella's stepsisters hacking off their feet so they can fit into the slipper, all those types. So those things I really found amusing. And then when I was 14, I think I was 14 when The Shining came out. And so I remember getting The Shining and sitting in my room, and it terrified me so badly that I couldn't leave my room till I finished reading that book. So it took me 2 days. My parents kept coming in, like, go outside and play. I was like, oh, I can't, because I got to know what happens with those demons. You know? And then I distinctly remember, and I tell this story all the time, I remember shutting that book when it was done and going, when I grow up, I want to be a horror writer and scare the hell out of people like Stephen King just scared me. And so that was really my motivation, is to get back at Stephen King. But you know, so yeah, I just love horror. I like the ride. Then Clive Barker came on the scene, and he kind of had a new way, at the time was new, way of approaching horror and grisliness, and kind of revamping very old tales into new kind of ideas for the modern person. I felt a lot of his, like his books of blood and stuff. When I was reading them at the time when they were coming out, some of the stories themselves felt familiar, but his dark spin on things was like hadn't been done before, and I really liked that. So I liked a lot of that too. So I like dark horror, you know, quiet horror and loud horror and all the crazy stuff in between. You know, you can go to these horror panels and horror conventions and people argue, you know, oh, quiet horror is better, splatterpunk's better. There's that, you know, but I think it's whatever you like, you know, just enjoy what you enjoy. And if it's horror, then yay.
What about you, Tony? What do you think appeals to people about frightening stories?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that are owned by horror that aren't owned by other sort of genres. And one of them is that it's almost always about a perverse fascination with something. And it requires novelty all the time, reinventing what is scary and what is you know, what is a nightmare. And you know, I mean, that's the sort of job of anybody who sits down and writes a zombie novel or a zombie film, is they have to come up with a different way for the zombie to behave and a different way for it to kill, or they're going to have to go the orthodox route and you know, either be complained against for being uninventive. But the idea of fascination as a pure pursuit that doesn't have a kind of necessarily a redemptive vein. It doesn't have to. I mean, I don't require a horror to give me a message about how to live my life better. Mm-hmm. In fact, I prefer it if it gives me some very bad information about that, as long as I get to ride someone's fascination and that it's honest. And that they are attempting to sort of approach it in a new way. So those things are nice for me because I can kind of smuggle in all kinds of different things into horror that you can't do, for instance, if you're writing a romance necessarily, which is about telling the same story over and over again. And everybody looks for the same moments. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, that's how people experience that. But in horror, the search for novelty and fascination kind of require you to, I think, be more honest and be more sort of raw and be more dangerous. So that I like all those things. You know, you see the argument in practically every single review about anything for millennia. And it actually comes out of the Bible, which is the idea that there's two functions or two operating strategies for everything that is made, and that is to edify, to teach you, and to comfort you, or to make you, to distract you from the passage of time so that you get immersed in it and you're entertained. So it's to teach and to entertain. And pick up any review of anything, and it will tell you how those things are balanced. And I prefer those things intensely unbalanced and gone in a direction that actually gives you upends you. But though, you know, I'm babbling now. Stephen King, you mentioned. I remember a long time ago, he had one of those books that he wrote about writing, and he said something like on writing, and it was something like, if what I try to do is create a psychological terror. If I can't do that, I will create scary situations and scary things, whatever. And then, but if I can't do that, I will reach for gore. I will go for the cheap gore gag. And I remember reading that, and I said, well, what if we inverted that? That what I really want to do is the cheap gore gag. And if I can't do that, I'll resort to psychological terror. So,
What actually brings me to the next question is basically, what are the essential elements of a horror story? So you've kind of covered a little bit about that.
Well, you know, you have your elements of a novel, and then you just make it scary. Now, you know, you got your creepy setting or your creepy character or your, you can usually tell a horror novel by its tone, how you're writing, how you describe things. And it doesn't have to be a dark and stormy night, but just maybe the attitude of the narrator, whether it's third person, first person, or whichever way you're writing it, you should be able to tell within, this is what I tell my students too, you should tell within the first page what genre you're in. So horror does have a lot of tropes that people who read a lot of horror just kind of naturally know. What's the actual question again?
What are the elements of horror?
Yeah,
What are the elements of horror?
Yeah, the essential
Suspense,
element.
thrill, conflict. You know, you want your main person to have to face something truly horrific, which is usually the villain, or it could be Christine the car, or the Cujo the dog, or whatever. And so they're you know, they want to get something, and this horrible thing is stopping them from that. Or maybe they're haunted by some secret from their past and worried someone's gonna unlock it and literally the vampire will come or whatever. But I do think elements of horror definitely have the suspense. It's like very close to romance, very close to sex. You know, you got your build up, your climax, and then the payoff. And horror is just darker and monsters. I don't know. I didn't really prepare my answer very well.
When I was around, when I was around 8, I used to collect all those like the great Universal models, you know, the classic, the Hunchback and the Phantom and the this and that. And I put them all together because I was like you. I mean, out of the womb, I was craving nightmares.
Yeah.
You know, they were the only things that I felt communicated something about my own experience, which I've always felt is slightly nightmarish. But I had these models, and I used to make them in my little room when I was 8 years old. Lots of that gray glue, I'm globbing on the glue, the paint, blam, blam. And I would get freaking high as hell, right? And I'd be my little 8-year-old head laying down on the pillow at 2 in the morning. I'd wake up and these things were alive, running around and like staring at me and talking to me. And that started me on the road right there.
Yeah.
The glue sniffing.
Yep, glue sniffing. That, you know, the 70s or whatever, that we all had the model glue. I made those models too and painted them, and yep, we were high on the glue. Maybe we still are.
But I think it starts, you have to have a kind of, like I said earlier, fascination that is sort of unrelenting, that you can't stop.
And like I have people tell me that I have like a dark sense of humor. Like I'll just be talking to regular normal people in the world, and not my fellow horror writer friends, and they'll be like, wow, you have such a dark way of looking at things, or I'll laugh at something which they deem as inappropriate, I guess. And yeah, so I you know, like Tony said, I think some of us are just born kind of ready to write horror.
Yeah, and I think that once you sort of school yourself a little bit, there's all kinds, it's a various thing, you know, horror. You've got sort of campy stuff and hilarious stuff,
There's so much
shitty stuff and good stuff, and you've got sort of
Sharknado,
you know what I mean? And then you've got the Human Centipede too.
Oh, I love the Human Centipede movies.
Yeah,
And Sharknado.
number 2. But you know, there's all of that. There's horror comedies, and lately I've been working with the Collingwood people on horror films. We sort of discovered, after making a couple of films that kind of got a little flat in the box office zone, and we had to kind of search, what is it that we're doing wrong? How come this stuff doesn't come to life? And we realized that they were actually ridiculously funny. But nobody was laughing because they were, which I still like, because I think it's really kitschy and ridiculous. That Septic Man should be like a comic opera. Instead, it's just like grisly, grim.
I'm that person that laughs at inappropriate places in the movie theater. I'm the one that everyone's going, oh my God. And I'm like, you know.
I'm that person too. I am.
Yeah.
So do either of you guys comment on society in your horror work? And because you do because of its uniqueness, does it have a particular strength at doing this in horror?
I think you can't not help commenting on society, because your person, most usually they're people, even if they're demons, you kind of ultimately society's involved. And so I guess like for me, a woman of a certain age and writing horror, I guess I come to things in a different way that maybe someone else would. And I do find that I do make societal comments, but not on purpose. Like I don't set out, I'm making a society statement. I'm
Yeah.
not like that. I just want some creepy, weird character to go through a hell and come out the other side, or sometimes they don't, and yeah, I think you can't help but comment on society. You think of the George Romero movies, like that's total comment, they're shopping at the mall because this is what they know, and
Mhm.
all that kind of stuff, right? I think you
Yeah,
can't
that,
help
that
it.
triggered a whole cascade of sort of political horror films.
Yeah.
My feeling around that is I'm less interested when you feel like something is a kind of message film, and George Romero is the sort of godfather of that. It's it's a red message, a red menace, or communism, or communist paranoia, or deep Southern racism, and then consumerism and stuff like that, and the other ones, and you buy it, but I find that once they set up, once an allegory or a metaphor or something like that that's supposed to be meaningful to set up, it very often expires before the end of the movie, and it doesn't really amount to much. You know what I mean? It's like saying something's bad. Let me remind you, something's bad. I'm going to say it again, something's bad, and you just shut up and kill people. Right?
Exactly.
But I think that actually right now, really important and great work is being done with the sort of coming forward of more diverse voices. More women are writing, and more people are publishing women, and more women are publishing themselves. And also sort of BIPOC authors, Black filmmakers have reinvented.
Jordan Peele.
Jordan Peele has
Totally
reinvented
reinvented
how you work figurative, meaningful language into a film, and it's highly original and absolutely aggressive and completely fantastic. That's where things are interesting. And First Nations people, Quantum Leap is a great, and I just heard that the director died.
Did he?
Yeah, like yesterday or something.
Ah, wow.
Sorry guys, but anyway, he's young, 46.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I think that those areas, for me, old white guy, I'm just sort of like twiddling my thumbs and writing automatic shit. It doesn't go anywhere. I'm okay with that. But I think that there's lots of that kind of commentary, editorializing work out there being done by people who are writing themselves, really, like you're saying, your experience as a woman writing, that's all automatically political.
Yeah.
A political thing. Right?
And then you think of something like Bird Box, I guess, where that's a society comment, because who are the people looking out the windows when there's monsters there or whatever, and how she has to work her way through. I don't know if that would be considered a society thing, but yeah, I never ever have set out to make a societal statement ever in my work ever.
Jordan Peele's a good example because he's definitely putting some messages out there. Like Get Out was, I thought, brilliant.
Get Out was brilliant. I really liked
from a comedian even.
Yeah. It's funny, I watched Us and I thought that I wasn't crazy about it. And then like a week later, I couldn't stop thinking about it.
Yeah.
And then I had to go back and kind of confirm for myself, did that actually happen in this movie? So yeah, absolutely fantastic stuff.
And Nope as well.
I haven't seen
that
yet.
No spoilers,
That's
please.
big society commenting movie too.
Yeah, and I mean, you've got a lot of that going on, which is fantastic. M. Night Shyamalan is somebody who I am a huge fan of, and I don't care what you say, Sephera.
I didn't say anything.
No, yes, you don't have to. I can see it. I'm a huge fan of The Happening. I think it's a masterpiece. Nobody likes it.
I know nobody
They're
likes
all
it.
wrong. And old. People just dissing on old,
I
or
haven't
the
seen
beach or
Old,
whatever.
so I
That's
can't.
old, right?
It's old, yeah. I
Yeah.
haven't seen it, so I cannot comment.
I just started there's a German film that just showed up on Netflix called Old People.
Mm.
It's actually really, messed up.
Oh, yeah. I've heard
And
about
I'm
that.
enjoying it. I kind of got halfway through and then I turned it off because I had to go to bed. It's my bedtime. And but it's terrific. A kind of a Shyamalan type of thing, a reduced, high concept idea that's delivered in a kind of one way. But I'd recommend it. It's just the images are fantastic, and the sense of these old people are revenging or having it,
Better than Cocoon, I hope.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But
I was hoping that was.
But
the
I mean, when
movie
you talk
I would
about,
just see it in front of my-
it does a lot of editorializing, a lot of commentary around the treatment of the elderly and shuffling them into old age homes. I mean, this is topical stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we
It
all
is.
confronted that.
Especially like the new issues that came out of the pandemic, for sure.
Yeah, no, yeah, and so it's a time, I recommend that one.
Oh, I consider Squid Game a horror thing, and that's a total societal statement, I would say.
100%, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
my,
know, actually, I think, so that's a good example. I remember a few years back, I did this talk on you're a science fiction fan and you don't know it. Well, I think a lot of people are probably also horror fans. and they don't
All
know
the
it.
time.
Lots
I
of-
mean, how many people
lots
are
of
watching
things
these
are-
shows and reading these books and don't realize, oh,
Yeah. Almost
Yeah.
every book has horror and romance in it, or story, I should
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Really, something crazy,
yeah.
like emotions or.
But you can go in a bunch of different directions, like Steven Soderbergh, is he the guy who made Mother? No,
I don't know.
no.
But that does bring us to like our next question, which is about there are so many subgenres of horror.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
So why do you
Bazillions.
choose your subgenres and what are they? Like tell
It
our
chooses
people.
me. I don't choose anything. I just I get a character in my head and just start writing and see what happens. That's kind of my thing. Pardon? I did bring a little bit to read
Read it.
right now.
Yeah, why not?
Sure. The first couple pages of a story. I have a book coming out. It's going to be launched at, me and another writer got together and we're publishing our collection of short stories that have been previously published. And so that's going to be launched at Frightmare in the Falls in a couple weeks. And it's called Dearly Departed is the name of the anthology. And the other author is Andrew Robertson. And so this story, this is the beginning of a story in that anthology. And this was also previously published in a vampire anthology. What was it called? Anyways, so The Blood Countess is the name of this story. I'll just read a little bit. On that desolate evening in the chilly grip of autumn, I walked with trepidation down the stone tunnel, my fingers clutching the heavy tray of bowls, sloshing with foul gruel, my heart beating as quickly as a hummingbird's wings. It was always cold and dank in that castle, and worse so since the immurement. It was often a puzzlement to me how life can go from brutally dull to magnificently glorious to stunningly fearful. She had shown me ways that I never would have known, certainly not as the child I had been when I first laid eyes on her. Her glamour, her generosity, and her beauty were hypnotically legendary, with pale porcelain flesh framing eyes as black as buttons and a plump, full mouth that had a perpetual sneer. When she stared at me and spoke, I would do anything for her. Alas, it was time to finish the journey that had started in what seemed a lifetime ago. The astrological forces were too strong to ignore. The call of the night, the wail of the watchers, all combined to push me down the path I had been dreading. Her screams of anguish were heard throughout the castle, especially when the winds were high. It was a wonder any sound penetrated through all those thick stone walls, but it did. Yowling threats, wailing sadness, high-pitched singing of her favorite operas, all sounds echoing distantly through my dreams and waking life until I could ignore them no longer. The torchlit, narrow stone hallway seemed excruciatingly long because of my faltering steps. The flames provided little warmth from the dampness. A light, chilly wind blustered by and then was gone like an animal rushing past me. I held the heavy wooden tray in front of me, keeping my eyes straight ahead, each step one closer to her. She wouldn't be expecting me. She thought I had been caught too. I had escaped detection, although my many fingers had pointed at me. By some stroke of magic, or perhaps by my own sheer intellect, I had been spared the fate of others. They were caught and found guilty, subjected to punishments consisting of their fingers being ripped off, followed by their bodies burned at the stake. Those of us spared kept a low profile after that, skulking around and doing our duties while hiding evidence of the Countess's carnage as we stumbled upon it. We seldom spoke to each other except for an occasional nod in our gratefulness to have survived. And then there she was, the beautiful one, locked in that wing of the castle for the rest of her life. I looked down at the bowls of gruel I carried. Surely not food she craved. She needed more than that. I put down the tray of food on the floor and wiped the sweat from my brow with the cloth I kept shoved down the front of my bodice. Even though it was cold, I was sweating. Chills ran up my spine. My hands were clammy. I hadn't seen her since the trials, not face to face. A wave of weakness washed over me, and I braced against the wall, barely able to gulp in the dense, musky air. I tugged at my corset strings, but the bitings wouldn't be loosened. No matter, I knelt down to retrieve the tray and walked the last few steps to the bricked up wall. The only opening in its face was a narrow gap in the stones, covered with a sliding wooden window, about 4 feet off the ground through which to pass rations to the prisoner inside. I put the tray on the floor in front of me and with trembling fingers began to slide open the slat. My heart beat so powerfully that I feared I would collapse. Could she smell me? Was she there, waiting? I half expected a hand to reach out for me like a ghostly claw. I knew that on the other side of the wall was a stone table. Hesitantly, I slid the first bowl through the opening. I pulled my hands away quickly before she could grab me and reach down to pick up the second bowl. Marguerite, she whispered, you have returned to me. Here's your dinner, Your Highness, I stammered, sliding the second bowl through. Again, I snatched my hands away from the opening before she could touch me. How are you feeling, Your Highness? I asked, standing back from the window, my back pressed against the wall to keep me from passing out from fear. I am not so well, Marguerite. Her voice was low. The sound of sniffling echoed out to me as if she were crying. I wanted to leave. I fear that I may be dying. Can you imagine? All this work to look young forever, and now I don't even care. The plaintive whine in her voice could have been convincing had I not heard that tone used just before something terrible happened. Perhaps after 4 years, she was truly remorseful for all that she had done. I didn't answer. I'm delighted you're here, my beautiful Marguerite. You have no idea how lonely I am, languishing away in this despicable vestibule. I can't speak. I looked down the hallway to see if there were guards lurking around. I knew I could have my tongue torn out for speaking to the Countess too much. The court had ordered as such. Yet disobeying the Countess could bring worse horrors. I pushed myself away from the wall and started to slide the slat shut. Her fingers reached out, grasping mine. She was still powerfully strong and easily pulled most of my hand through the opening. I muffled my cries as sharp pain pierced my fingertips and her lips greedily sucked my blood. I prayed no one saw as I let her feast. How I'd missed her. My heart ached as I pulled my bloody fingers away. I stared at the blood dripping down and with the other hand shut the door. I'll leave it there for now.
Very good. So surely you like Shirley's accent. Also, there was a word I've never heard before. That you're gonna have to.
Said it wrong.
You're gonna have to explain to me.
Immune.
Yeah, that's the one.
Where was it? I did look at since the amerment. So when they locked up Countess Bathory, they called it doing an amerment. I
Really?
that was the word they used for when they locked her in forever to die inside.
So is this about Countess Bath?
Yeah, so
blood
she's
Countess?
the one locked in, and then
Yeah.
Marguerite's
Sure.
she just sucked her finger, and now she's gonna have her strength back, and
Hot.
shit's gonna happen.
It's hot.
Yep. They're gonna travel around together.
Great, love it.
Oh, thank you.
So we have one question from Michael White. He asked, when do you know to let the suspense breathe? And he's asking about pacing, basically.
That's a good question, and that's a question that you have to keep on your mind all the time. You have to keep in mind how the reader or viewer is consuming it, and how much space. I mean, that's something that has rules and doesn't have rules. I mean, everyone will sort of find a pace that's natural to themselves, I think, but it takes a lot of listening to the words, not just the ideas that are laid out there. You have to listen to. That's why I like automatic writing, because you physically hear the rhythm of the words. You physically hear the consonants and the vowels and the rhythms in syllables. And if you're listening carefully, you can move it around for certain effects that are far exceed the content, I think, in writing. And that is the sort of the structure, the rhythm, the pacing, the sound, even on the page, the visual thing, which I've started doing. I've stopped using the article and. I started to stop that a few years ago because I like the way that sets up a noun or whatever proceeds from it, and gives it a kind of a spot where for a second you see the word on the page without reading it because the wrong article. And so I've made that a habit because I like the physical presence of the word on the page. I think is important. But it's a very good question, and especially in film. You have editing is where a lot of that happens, but you have to sort of nail it in the script. First of all, that is the setup, the cut, where things stop, in the middle of what, and where in the middle do you begin again? Like it's irregular, but you have to find a kind of structure in that irregularity, because it gets very tedious if you start every scene in the beginning of the scene, and then this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and it's over. Next scene started like this. But you need to cut it so that there's a momentum. It has a headlong feeling and an inevitable that requires you to cut in from the end and pull. But it's a very good question, and I don't think there are any hard and fast rules around that, and there shouldn't be, because I think everybody's got a different inner rhythm.
True. Yeah. Every book has its own rhythm and pace too.
And you can tell when it's not getting it, because it becomes clunky and bangy and awkward, and you can tell when something isn't succeeding. You may not know why. You can tell.
How do you approach?
It's funny you keep talking about automatic writing, because I feel like that's a lot of, like when I'm doing a first draft, I just kind of type and go. So I feel like it's almost, I used to tell people I just kind of go into a trance and just type and I barf it out or whatever. And people don't like it when I say that, but then that's what other drafts are for, is that's when you learn what your story is. You throw away a whole pile of stuff, like you said, all those extra words, words that using too many words to get to where you're going. Every word is precious, and every action or piece of dialogue should move the story forward or the pace forward. So that's in the subsequent editing. You can throw out entire characters because they're just slowing stuff down.
Yeah.
But definitely there's a huge difference between novel writing and screenwriting, because novel writing, you can meander around all over the damn place and follow all kinds of different people into whatever the hell you want. But screenwriting, there's definitely, your act one, your act two, your act three, shit has to happen at the midpoint, shit has to happen here, blah, blah, blah,
you have to learn those things.
Yeah,
You
there's
can't
definitely a
not
template,
learn
because
those.
your audience has an expectation, the people giving you the money
I've
has
always
the
been a bit
expectation.
confused by how did it become so
Audience focused?
well, I mean, just because you can kind of boil down script writing into a 30-page thing, right?
Yeah.
It tells you about how to do it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really vary very much. In every script meeting I'm ever in, it brings up the same sort of, this has to appear on page 15, at the end of this has to happen. And you're like, why?
Why?
And I guess it
That's how we've
has
been
something
trained.
to do with, yes, you've been trained
You've been
to
trained
receive it
to
that way.
accept that.
Yes, I mean, it's like you're telling a joke without a punchline,
Yeah.
and then, saying goodbye or something, and it's like, no, that's not how things work. So,
Yeah, it's just how
it's a curious thing. I mean,
it's weird.
there is a lot of sort of, instructional stuff going way back to Aristotle and the unities and that sort of thing that are not to be varied. In fact, Bruce and I used that idea, the old ancient idea of the unities, when we made Pineapple, the film. This, one place, one time, one set of characters, and you don't leave that time. You stay in it. You don't leave that set. You don't leave and we had very strict rules about you can't go outside. And in fact, the producers got really mad because they're thinking, you're making a zombie movie and there's no freaking zombies in the movie. And so they said, we need you to get some zombies in it. And so we said, okay. So they spent a stupid amount of money on getting 500
Zombies.
drunk teenagers, which is who's going to show up for a casting call for a zombie movie, right? And they're all going to be whatever. And so then they'd show up. We shot it. We had snow machines and everything. And we were standing on the roof looking down. I looked over to Bruce and said, we're not using any of this, are we? And he said, no, not a frame, nothing. Just let it go. And it was terrible. I mean, because you have to be making something explicitly funny, campy, to put out a casting call for zombie extras.
Yeah.
Because it's just going to be stoner animals that are going to show up.
Yep.
Right. It's all going to be jean jackets and red eyes.
Yeah.
Which is fine depending on what you want.
Yeah, it is. There is a very big difference, I think, between writing a novel and a screenplay. And you've both done both. Is there a preference, or is it a mood thing, or like a headspace thing for you guys?
Well, I went back to when I went to university, I went intending to major in creative writing, but they're all such snobby assholes, I didn't. And so I had VP Nickel as a teacher. He was amazing. He was so
that's nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
glad he died right after.
Oh.
And I also studied screenwriting at the same time, and I enjoyed that. But then I got married right away after university, and I was and I married a filmmaker, and so I was kind of feeling my way through screenplays or novels. But what I hit success with first was selling novels to Leisure Books at Dorchester Publishing. So I went that route, which was easier as a young mother, and then I became a young single mother. So it's way easier to be home writing novels than trying to, because screenwriting, as you know, it's a people thing. You got to go places, meet people, do shit, fly around, do what, it's a very,
It's a hustle.
yeah, it's a constant hustle, and you can't be, well, I know a lot of
get beat
single
up.
mothers
You get
do
beat
it,
up,
but I
too.
wasn't in the headspace to deal, because having been married to a filmmaker, I stayed away from the film business for like 30 years
Yeah, no kidding.
because I saw all this stuff. And now, and
It's a
actually,
punishing industry.
it is, and I do background work for about the last 5 years or so. Just the odd time I'm not in the union, I don't like it that much. I just do it now and again to get out of the house. I got to be on What We Do in the Shadows last week, but so it's interesting because you just meet other people. You get out of the just being alone all the time, and you get a sense of seeing. I'm just saying, for anyone who wants to get into screenwriting, you really should be on a set, see how it all goes down, understand, cameras and how many cameras and who's running around, and you got 500 extras picking their noses, and then you got something on wires up there, and so it really helps with understanding how to write a screenplay that could actually be made, I think. But so like I said, then the pandemic, and I'd still be kind of dabbling a bit in screenwriting, but I kind of just went, okay, I got to shift my brain because I can't deal with anything. And maybe if I change my focus, and I was watching all these webinars and stuff. And so then so I'm trying the screenwriting thing. I'm still working on novels too, but the kids are grown, so I have more time.
I find that there is obviously a difference. One is a solitary thing, and until you get into editing or
once
you're
you're
not-
dealing with a publisher.
once you're dealing with a publisher, that's a different story. And
but even then, it's still pretty solitary.
even then you can be mysterious.
Yeah.
But when you're doing writing a screenplay, it's a collaborative process that you have to make concessions and compromise and try to anticipate what is required of this particular project and deliver it.
Yeah.
And so those are things you have to learn. You can't just, you can't walk into a situation like that. You have to sort of learn by doing. and making a lot of big mistakes. But I find that one of the reasons why I do screenwriting and fiction, and I do different things too. And I always, now my rule is, because I think it's all a hustle, that I'll need, if this week the screenplays that I'm working on aren't moving forward, then I'll have some fiction that I've got to move forward.
Yeah.
And so then when that fiction sort of becomes, it's a wall, I'll pull in something. And so you've got to hustle to make sure that you're actually making a little bit of money.
Yeah, that's it too. Like, screw this writing for the love of it stuff.
Well, novel writing, I heard somebody once said, and I think it's totally true, novel writing is the most expensive hobby a writer can have.
Yep.
And
And that's why I sell every book I write, because it's not a hobby, goddammit.
No, I know, no, it's not, of course not. But I mean, you
For
have to
me.
hustle, you have to
It
hustle.
is. It
And,
is.
and in screenwriting, you have to be able to listen to, punishing feedback and sort your way through the process and learn, there's a hell of a learning curve.
And because if you're writing novels, you also need to, like, I'm a member of a critique group. And I think if I wasn't, I wouldn't have been able to grow at the pace I have with my writing.
Mhm.
So
Well,
we need that. It's got to be constructive though.
Yes,
You gotta
yeah, I will,
trust.
there's more forgiveness in writing fiction, I think,
I think-
generally.
I think because I've had a little bit of success in novel writing, that now that I'm, starting to swim in the screenwriting pond, I'm not going to be, and also I'm older now and wiser. Maybe not wiser, but whatever. I'm not going to be like, oh my God, you can't change that. Oh, my life's over. Like, no, it's like, change it, do it. Just give me the check. Like, I'm sort of in that mindset now, like everything isn't precious and has to stay and be thing. And
Yeah.
and even working in novel writing, I was always pretty lucky that I never had to change anything major, except my very first book, House of Pain, which was kind of based on the Bernardo Homolka stuff back then, and it opens with the bulldozing of the house. But back then, Leisure Books didn't want Canadian stuff, so I had to move it from Ontario to New York State. So the whole setting's different, and but it wasn't really about them, it was kind of about them. But even with that, I'm like, yeah, sure, just I'm getting published, I don't care. Let's go. New York's just like Ontario, we can do this. It's just it is it's all very, because it's it's in the woods, haunted house in the woods story. So the woods are the same in New York and Ontario, whereas, but if I moved it to Arizona, then that's a whole different kettle of fish, right? So,
That's woods.
so flexibility is good, but you don't want to be so flexible you lose your voice or whatever.
I separate things that I have a proprietary interest in, adapting my novel or adapting stories into for a filmmaker is something I have proprietary interest in, and I want to have some control and last word on certain things. But there are also things that that you tell me what you want and I'm going to go do it for you.
Yeah.
And those sorts of, which I really enjoy. And I've learned a lot in doing that you have to deliver a kind of a product in spite of your own sort of sulky, creative, soppy self that wants to do the right more, so you have to sort of grow up a little bit and get into, put on your big boy pants.
Yeah, that's like when I wrote that interactive novel thing you read on the phone. That was the straight work for hire.
Yeah.
And it was their idea and everything. But for me, it was because I've been writing for so long. It was like paint by numbers writing.
Oh, and
I have no
doing that.
interest in this, and they're giving me good money, not like the
Yeah.
novel I just wrote.
No, I know. Strangest thing.
Give me more.
Jesus, strangest, spookiest thing. And for me, I think for me, I'm lucky because I established early on that I'm crazy. And so when I get hired, I'm gonna give you something crazy. You want something crazy? And everybody does.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you look me in the eye and say, you're a crazy bugger. So we want you. And then when they throw it back at me and say, this doesn't make any sense. Remember? Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of it's a hard road though, because it's the road to getting a film made is never the same twice, and always a series of impossible flukes and accidents and bits of luck and serendipity. So it's just a very hard thing to say, this is what you need to do and you will get ahead. But doing everything you possibly can and not expecting to get those rewards for the first 10 or 15 years is really what I would say is probably just true. You have to be willing to sort of, like you said, walk sets, be on sets, work with so-and-so, do this, try to publish, apply for grants. And people say that fiction writers, I don't apply for grants anymore because I don't need them and I don't think I deserve them, but people apply. I tell people apply for grants because, not because you're going to get $20,000, you're going to get publishers and writers to read your stuff.
Yeah,
they're going to get paid to read your stuff in the jury, and that's valuable.
Yeah, that's true.
It is valuable.
Jury
Publishers,
is the thing.
and you'll get, if you're worth finding, you'll be found.
Yeah, that's true.
So I mean, there's lots of ways, but it's just doing it and not expecting, you're gonna get
So when
rich or published.
I'm gonna ask a question. When, sorry. When you were working with Bruce McDonald, did you know him before the project? Or how did
No,
that
I
come
didn't.
about?
No, I didn't. And it was a really funny story. The book Counting People Changed Everything was in manuscript form. And my editor at the time at ECW, Michael Holmes, he knew Bruce McDonald, or had met him at a party or something. And he got into his head that he thought Bruce would like this.
Oh, okay.
And so we gave him the manuscript pages.
Oh, nice.
Wasn't even
a book yet.
No. And so he then told me through, Michael told me that Bruce would like him. Oh, no, that's cool, whatever. And then Bruce showed up. We launched the book at the Combo.
Right.
And Bruce showed up. I've never met him before.
Yeah.
He sits down and puts a Kinder Egg on the table, buys me a beer, and he says, "This is my option." And he said, and I had never written a screenplay. I don't think I even think I'd ever read a screenplay, right? And his next question was, "Do you want to write the screenplay?" And I said, "Well, yeah."
You do.
Yeah, of course.
That's what creatives and entrepreneurs both do.
Yeah.
Someone asks them a question and they don't know how to do it, they say yes, because they know that they'll figure it out.
Absolutely. And 20 years later, I figured it out.
That's fun.
Yeah.
The Kinder Egg.
Yeah. But it was the film that we ended up making had nothing to do with the scripts we wrote the first 10 years. It was a complete fluky thing. CBC commissioned a radio play.
Yeah.
And so Bruce said, do you think we could turn this into a radio play? I said, yeah, why not? So I just wrote out like a 2-page synopsis of just put it on the radio. I pulled a character out of the book, Grant Mazzy, because I wanted to get the option to get paid.
Of course.
So then CBC paid, the actors paid me and paid Bruce to produce this radio play, which we didn't finish. Because halfway through, we thought, dude, all we need to do is get a camera and we got a movie. Because McCaddy was amazing. And, and Lisa, and everybody was so nice. So we went and shot the movie. And when it came back, premiered at TIFF and was doing well, had some good things said about it. CBC suddenly goes, hang on a second. you owe us a radio play. And so we had to go back into the CBC studios and finish. But I mean, it's not something you say, that really worked well, let's do that again. It's not possible. You can't do that again.
It just shows how crazy the business is.
Oh, and fluky. And you have to say, yes, I'm ready for everything and over deliver.
Yeah.
Before the deadline.
Thanks, Colleen. Someone joining us.
Awesome. Hello.
Seems like we could do a whole thing on just screenwriting for TV and
Yeah,
TV, maybe TV, radio, and movies.
there's a lot of funny, crazy stories, and that's why everybody who works in the business ends up going, "What's your next film about?" About filmmaking. Everybody gets there at some point, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the story.
Well, it seems like you guys have answered a lot of our questions. You've given us some tips for beginning horror writers to some degree. Is there anything else you would add to that?
Tips for horror writers. Well, read a lot.
Yeah, read a lot.
Try and understand, it's frustrating. I do a lot. I'm a freelance editor, so I edit in all genres, but it can be frustrating as, like if it's like someone crashing a party, it's like, I'm just going to write a horror novel because it's easy and I can do this even though
Well, yeah.
well, go for it. So you see how easy it is. But say read a lot in the genre you're trying to write in, and see what's been done before, because you may have ideas and we say there's only like 7 stories or whatever anyways, but make sure you're putting a twist that didn't just come out last week or whatever. Doesn't mean you have to read everything and watch everything all the time, every minute. You should be familiar with the classics and then moving forward. And then, I can do join the Horror Writers Association thing for networking, going to conventions. I'm going to World Fantasy Convention. It's in New Orleans this year. That's not really horror, but you will meet a lot of the same people. And then
Take Sephera's course.
yeah, take my courses. And then
Where are you teaching?
I teach at George Brown. Right now I'm in the middle of teaching creative writing, and also hopefully next term I'll run my novel writing again. And in June, there's StokerCon, which is the Horror Writers Association. It used to be World Horror, now it's StokerCon. And this year it's in Pittsburgh, which is almost drivable, I think, maybe. And again, it's about meeting agents and editors. They have pitch sessions, they have a mini film festival. And so meeting people, doing the same thing you are can be so inspiring. And, it doesn't mean you have to meet an agent or an editor or get published, but you can see the sorts of people and make the connections, because really we're all in this together. I find it, the horror community is very welcoming, and well, some people aren't, but most of them are. And everyone, they'll tell you, who's looking for stuff, who's doing stuff, because every writer is different, and most writers don't care about stealing your ideas because they have so many floating around their own heads they can't keep up as it is, right? So definitely get to know other writers, and Linda was saying workshops, that can be good or bad. I personally don't really like doing workshops. I was in one for a few years. We were all professional authors, but even then I find it hard, even professional advice. It depends what kind of person you are and what you're trying to get out of the session, right? But I would say if a lot of people have the same comments about your work, then give it a shot. But if just a couple people are saying something and you're like, at the end of the day, it's still your story and it's still other people's opinions, right? So always listen, but it doesn't mean you have to change things if you feel married to it. And I'm not sure what else to say about how to be a horror writer.
The only thing I would add is read as well as just absorb, as much sort of the horror literature as you can, and everybody knows the names, and there's some great names, and a golden age, I think, in the 80s, but 80s and 90s. But read magazines and places that publish fiction. Read what's getting published. Read Fangoria. Read Rumor. Read magazines. Read anthologies. There are anthologies that get published, and find out what presses are publishing anthologies. And if you think you're ready to sort of submit something, take a look and get a sense of what they're accepting and what they're publishing, and are you a fit?
Yeah.
And I do that deliberately. I'll go, I need to publish something and I don't know where. So I'll just start looking around at who's currently publishing, and then I'll zero in on what's most likely the good fit and send it in. And very often it works out well. But you also get a sense, And I've had this numerous times where I'll write something and then I'll go read, and you'll be humbled. You realize, no, it's not ready. Because you forgot how good people are, right?
Yeah, really.
So, yeah, that's my only.
Yeah, that's a very important point is when you're dealing with publishers, magazines, anthologies, whatever, read the guidelines. If they say
Yeah.
double space that
yeah.
person, that thing, you know, like,
Yeah.
I know it sounds simple, but that's one way they separate the wheat from the chaff. You're not formatted correctly, boom, especially screenwriting, I've heard, they don't even look. So you want to help yourself. So don't write in crayon, don't handwrite, do your 12-point double space with your 1-inch margins. Don't try and cram a bunch of words in pretending you don't notice that you're 500 words over the limit, because everybody knows that trick. So you're not pushing anyone. But that's most important, is read the guidelines. Like you
Yeah,
said,
you totally need to do
see that you're plugging in to where your story fits.
Yeah, yeah.
Does anyone here have any questions for our authors? No. Any more online? No, we're good.
We covered everything.
We did. I think
It's
we
all
did pretty
done.
good.
Happy
Covered
Halloween.
more than everything.
What are you
which is
watching right now,
fabulous.
Sephera, on your?
What am I
Tubes.
watching?
Yeah.
I finally finished Dahmer.
Did you?
Yeah, I made it through. I made it to the end.
10 freaking hours.
I usually am a binge watcher, but of course, now that we're kind of getting back to work, I don't
Yeah.
have time to binge anymore because I gotta.
I've been on a
write.
bad run lately. It's just, well, the Dahmer was difficult.
Yeah,
The first 6 episodes were better than the last 4 because it tried to rehabilitate its own
yeah,
sickness, right? Which is kind of like, why are you doing that?
yeah.
Anyway, but that's fine. But then I went on this run of like the new Mike Flanagan, the Midnight Club.
Oh, I
And then
haven't. Is
I
the
watched-
Midnight Club up?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
And
I
then
guess
I shouldn't say too much, but then I watched the Luckiest Girl Alive, and then
Yes, I
I
watched that.
tried to watch Blonde.
I
And
watched
I'm
Blonde.
like, freaking kill me now.
I had to
It's
do
just
2 days of
so
Blonde.
depressing. I
Yeah.
just wanted to die.
Yeah.
Like, and the Midnight Club is all about cancer-ridden teenagers.
Oh, shit.
So everybody's dying.
Yeah.
I was like, I mean, you find that out in
So
the first
movie
10
reviews
minutes. So.
and spoilers from our horror authors.
Yeah, no, that's not a spoiler. You find that out in the little blurb ads at the beginning.
And it's a book anyways, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
Yes, no, I asked the question before, and I think that Michael White also asked, you mentioned script structure is a help or a creative block, which I think you pretty much answered that already as
What's
well.
it? Dahmer is hard to watch before bed,
Oh.
so I have to watch.
Dahmer is hard to watch before bed, so I have to watch an episode of something else lighter after a few
Yeah, like
episodes.
The
of
Luckiest
Dahmer
Girl.
from
That's
Yeah, the
Angela.
Luckiest
Yeah.
Girl, it's a lovely
Yeah.
one.
It's
It
a lovely
combines
one.
some real
Yeah.
highlights.
It was not at all what I thought it was.
Oh.
And I have to say, the main reason I watch it, because I hate knowing what I'm about to watch, so I never read the things. But
I
I love
didn't-
Mila Kunis and I love Finn Whitrock. But oh my God, poor Finn, all he's doing is taking his clothes on and off. Did you notice that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know why it was a novel that I didn't read.
I hadn't read it either.
But it sort of forced things together that didn't need to be together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The one thing and the other thing overlapping. It's like, what am I nauseous about now? I can't tell.
Yeah.
So anyway, I mean, but a lot of people liked it. And
Yeah. I didn't hate it, but it wasn't.
I didn't hate it. I hated Blonde. I couldn't finish it. I got 30
I
minutes in.
finally, I made myself watch it all just so I can say that I watched it all and have an opinion on it, which is,
I'm like,
it's just another fictional version of Maryland. Like, that's how I
it's the
approach it.
Joyce
That's how
Carol's. I
see
don't even
it.
know why you would go back.
Yeah, I don't even
I
know
don't know why you would do it. And poor Anna de Armas, she's tremendous she's not been, seems to me like the role has not been found.
I did not like her that much. She did a good job.
Yeah.
But someone else probably should have played that part. I don't want to be an asshole, because she did do an amazing job, but yeah, I could always tell it was her.
It
but
was just
it-
dull and bad and brutal.
You probably
ugly.
didn't get far enough where there's a lot of nakedness.
I
Like
said
you're
the
probably-
nakedness, it was, and then,
But
you know,
it
that was
was
like
like
90% of why I watched the damn thing.
Yeah,
But when the
it's-
nakedness got up there, I'm like,
It's just so gratuitous.
I just feel
It's like
so
the
sick
Finnick
now.
dog
I
taking
feel
his
so
clothes
sick
off,
now.
you
Put
know?
your clothes back on. Let's end this freaking thing.
Although I kind of liked the threesome idea. I thought that, I don't know if that was.
I didn't
true.
get there. Spoiler. Is that a spoiler
Oh,
you just laid down there?
Maybe, I
There's a
guess.
threesome in the blonde?
It's like for an hour and a half or something, like it's most of the movies. Maybe you didn't get that.
Oh, yes, I did. Yes, with the two,
Charlie
Anyone else?
Chaplin's Olivia.
yeah, Charlie Chaplin. Where are we?
Do you want to
still
do it
on?
on mic? You? Anyone else? No? Okay,
sorry,
we've
we're just
got
rambling.
Marilyn online and Bruce online,
Uh-oh. Hi, guys.
or is that just Bruce? Marilyn, are you doing open mic? You're muted.
There. Am I muted now? No? Okay.
Which one should I turn on? This one? Where is it? Yeah, mute.
I thought I was unmuted, am I?
Yeah.
Hold on, Marilyn.
Okay. I'm here.
Where's the volume on this one? Down here?
Or alternatively, we can do it on there.
I can do it here. I know where this one is. Okay. Can we hear Marilyn?
Can you
You
hear
wanna
me
say-
now?
We can hear you.
Oh, good. Okay.
Can you hear her? So it won't go any louder, so.
Ah. I'll try to speak loudly without yelling.
Okay, give her a shot, Marilyn. What are you gonna read for us?
Oh, oh boy, you caught me by surprise.
Well, Bruce can go first if he wants.
Okay, I can.
Okay,
is-
there we go.
Is Michael gonna do something?
Yeah, we'll do you two first because we're set up.
Okay, all right, let me just bring something up here.
Ugh.
Okay, this is not horror. Hopefully, it's not horrible. It's from my independently recently published YA adventure mystery novella. And it's not one of the action scenes. It's a character reveal scene, if you will. So I hope it's not too boring, but I want to read this in part because this was one of the last things I added and one of the things I was most concerned about adding because it's the character who is a ex-con biker is met on the bus by the three key characters that the book's about, three teenagers. Matt, who's 17, and his twin sister, and their best friend, Sadia. And I wanted this character, for some reason, to be Indigenous, maybe just because of all the publicity, or maybe because I wanted a little more ethnic scope to the book. But I was feeling very sensitive, and I don't know Indigenous culture well at all, if anything. Everything I know is basically stereotyped from growing up on the prairies. So I didn't do it. And then finally I decided, the heck with it, I'm going to try. I tried to meet some Indigenous people, didn't know where to go, wasn't successful. Then after I wrote it, I contacted a couple to see if they might read it. One was interested in it, but didn't think she'd have time, and she didn't. But after reading her book, Elaine Alec, Calling My Spirit Back, I realized, yeah, I'm not being stereotypical here. And then after reading it, I realized that although this is very different than my childhood in a way, or growing up as a teen, that actually much of it reflected some of the kids I hung out with and a couple of things that I might have done. For example, the mention, you'll hear it, of sniffing gasoline while some of the kids I hung out with sniffed glue. And so actually, the backbone of this is actually, I realized after I wrote it, part of my experience. So anyway, with all that, it's the first time I've read it in front of an audience. So we'll give it a try and see how it goes. So they meet this guy on the bus and they get to know him through the part of the story. And this is, I guess, about halfway to 2/3 of the way through the story. He opens up about his background. So here we go. I'm Nakota Assiniboine from a reserve in Saskatchewan. My parents died in a car accident when I was 14. My uncle took me in. I liked him, but at the time I was pretty angry. I withdrew and started hanging out with some of the rougher kids, started sniffing glue and gasoline. He stopped, his face frozen, and took a slow, deep breath through his nose. Some of them snuck off the reserve at night. They wouldn't tell me what they were up to. I begged them to let me come along. One night they told me to join them. They made me their lookout while they broke into a convenience store in a small town gas station and stole cigarettes, junk food, and drinks. When we got back to the res, they said if I wanted to hang with them, I needed to prove my worth. My initiation was to break into the same store a few nights later while they waited outside. So I did. Except this time, the owner was camped inside with a baseball bat and a loaded shotgun. His eyes lowered. Irene broke the uneasy silence. And Chuck looked at her. That was when I hit bottom. I was looking into the barrel of a gun. I hated my life. And now I was either going to die or go to jail. On top of that, we waited. No one said a thing. Chuck sighed. What made it worse, Bert, the owner of the gas station, was my uncle's friend. I knew him. My parents used to stop there and buy me ice cream sometimes. He'd give me a free bag of chips. Ash blurted out, "You robbed someone you knew?" Chuck closed his eyes, his face grim. Yeah, not the proudest day of my life. The first thing Bert did after making me lie on the floor and tying my feet together like I was a horse was to call my uncle. You were lucky he called your uncle instead of the cops, I said. Chuck opened his eyes, meeting mine. Not really. My uncle, the only person who cared about me, was also a cop on the res. Our band was one of the first to be allowed self-policing. He'd be the one who would have to arrest me. When Uncle showed up, I tried to play the tough guy, make like I didn't care. Except I wasn't a tough guy, and I did care. I broke down, pissed my pants. I lay there thinking about my parents and about my grandmother, who had died the year before the accident, and my great-grandmother, a kind, strong woman. A tiny smile crept into the corner of his lips. He tugged his beard. This is from her gene pool. She was French, married my grandfather, and moved on to the reserve. The smile dropped away. They were all there, standing in my mind with other elders, all of them looking at me and what I'd done. That was the darkest day of my life. And that's the end of that section.
Very good.
What made you? Oh.
Yeah, I'm in Barrie, but I can't quite hear you without the mic on.
Find it.
I had a question. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yeah.
Just a couple questions quickly. When you approach the First Nations people, I assume for sort of some guidance on this story and this material, what did they say to you?
Well, I only approached a couple through Instagram. I didn't know anybody, and I didn't feel comfortable walking on to, although I'm close to the Wata territory, walking in and just saying, maybe I should have been brave. So I had just told them that I had written the piece and I, wanted to hear if I was did it well, or if I didn't want to be stereotypical in any way. And the one woman, as I said, was very interested, but she was busy, and she is very busy. I follow her on Instagram, and we had some a little bit of conversation back and forth. And the other one I approached, I'm not even sure she was from my hometown, so I thought that might be a bridge, but I never got a response back from her. But it turned out she was pregnant and very close to giving birth, so I think she probably had a few other things on her plate. So that was it. I didn't go much further than that, and I decided I got to get this done. I'm doing it, and I just wrote it. But as I say, I did read her book after, the one who had, was willing to help me if she could squeeze the time in. Having read the book, then I felt comfortable using what I had written. So sorry, you were just going to say.
Yeah, my only suggestion, because the writing is fine. My only suggestion is to don't stop getting opinions from First Nations people, because you may be sort of bundling a couple of problems for yourself in this approach to fiction down the road. And I think the best way to sort of, the only people that can tell you honestly are the people that you're writing in the voice of. So I would just recommend, continuing to sort of dip into for relevant First Nations people for some guidance. That's all. But the writing is fine. The writing is good.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
my only.
Yeah, no, it's good advice. I didn't think of going back to them, but I'll do that. I'll keep
I unmute myself.
I'm gonna meet someone. So thank you.
Marilyn, do you want to unmute yourself and give us a go? Just unmute yourself.
Okay, I kind of picked something while we were listening to Bruce. It's from the novel that I've just almost finished putting online. It's called Dark Temptation. And because it turned out to be such a long novel, I've experimented with publishing it in parts. So it's been coming out in kind of part 1, part 2, part 3. So I'm going to read a bit from part 1. It's a vampire novel, but it also has angels, fallen angels, and demons in it. And the vampire named Jonathan, he's been more or less forgiven his sins, and he is determined not to give in to his vampire lifestyle. But in this section, a young Amish girl has become very infatuated with him, and she snuck away to his house and has been trapped by a snowstorm. So she has to stay the night. And I'm going to jump in where, after she's retired, Jonathan is sitting down by the fire. So there will be maybe a little bit of angel demon kind of things going on too. So I'll read a bit from that. Jonathan watched flames creep along the logs he had set on the glowing coals, fingertips tilted together. His book rested unattended in his lap, and a fresh glass of blood stood on the table beside him. He regarded it in distaste before lifting it to his lips. He almost spit the poor substitute back into the glass. It is as vinegar on a tongue accustomed to the ambrosial sparkle of champagne. Every time he sipped, the image of Rebecca Ambrosch leapt unbidden into his mind. It was as though she lured him, entreated him, summoned him to do that which no vampire could resist. So why do you refuse to taste the manna she offers? Lord, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. He set the glass aside, features twisting in revulsion, one hand clenched into his fist. Bloody hell, it's like dangling candy in front of a child's nose and telling him he can't have it. Forbearance, strength, sacrifice. He gritted his teeth as the fire of bloodlust erupted in his veins. Hunger, desire, fulfillment. She was summoning him. Yielding, he let his mind reach out to hers. The dream he saw shocked him and honed his vampire senses to a raw, searing edge he couldn't suppress. Limbs entwined, they lay together on the bed, her nightgown discarded, her velvet skin gleaming in the flickering firelight. Her head was thrown back, eyes closed, her delicate form quivering in sweet impassioned surrender. He bent over her slender throat, his mouth clamped to her throbbing jugular. Her breaths came in panting gasps, punctuated by his almost inaudible sucking, their hearts beating as one. The most staggering detail that had him groaning in disbelief was his own nakedness as he impelled himself in copulation with her. The double penetration accelerated the hunger to a new level of compulsion. God help him, he could feel the vigor of arousal, taste that hot, intoxicating elixir, and his mouth watered. He tore himself away from the tantalizing vision, but even as it faded, she whispered his name, a mere breath of sound no mortal ear would ever have caught. Come to me. I will pay any price you ask, only come. Tonight, she slept under his roof, not in a distant house from which he could retreat. Her lure was irresistible, the blood pulsing through her veins, a steady, relentless beat. Her body dreams, a lifeline pulling him to her in painful entreaty. His hand went to his chest as the visceral ache. Should he yield, give her what she desired, the fulfillment of her amorous dreams, while easing his need for her blood? The irresistible lure drew him to his feet almost without realizing it. No, he mustn't succumb, mustn't, but when he tried to resume his seat, the allurement acted like a hand gripping his shirt, refusing to let him sit. In fact, the draw strengthened, tugging him forward a few resistant steps. Dear God, he had no choice but to surrender. He wouldn't hurt her. He would only look, not touch, not pierce, not drink. Steps slow and heavy, he made his way to her room. And I'll leave it there. Am I still online?
There we go. Well done, Marilyn. That was the perfect reading for tonight, for sure. Yeah. Okay, we have one audience member to do a reading. So. Well.
Right, you can face the audience.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Are you unmuting?
That's happened on cyber phone. What happens when you don't have someone to pull you out of the slump? No one to slap some sense and say, look at this dump, you're a crumpled up version of who you used to be. There's nothing here for you except maybe misery. So get up, make like a tree and leave this toxic mentality. But here I am, the root of this corrosive issue. My skin tissue has turned black and blue. Entropy sets into the chamber of my chest muscle. Its best up beneath the rib cage, the nest where atrophies degenerative progress. Veins that fail to connect to a heart that cuts out tears and just wants to rest for the rest of its duration, but transferring life is its occupation, and if it stops the body into the trunk beneath the soil, blood will boil as oil is poured over violently. What healthy skin remains. When you are the only tree left to maintain, you have to explain inside these shiny eyes are now very that once were to great capillaries of towering of life so grand. Our leaves were always bright, there was no we all shared each other's light, making sure every woods were understood. But as I blink outside of memory into the brink, my roots sink deeper into despair, inside a nightmare that nobody cares, as the iron teeth snare into the bark of my skin, the sap extracted within a syringe, as my nerve endings twinge. I see a twig twirling, the instrument of my demise. As I simmer down, I see the sunrise one last time. As I look around, I realize there's no one to either side. This must be what happens to the solemn tree that has no one around them to witness their descent. So next time when you pick up a brown decaying leaf, think of that once marvelous tree, a majestically rested upon, swaying to the windy songs of days once was, but now long gone.
Oh, great. Oh, great.
Yeah.
If you can I recommend something here? L'Autrement. That's the pseudonym of Isidore de Casse, who wrote in I think the 1870s a book called The Songs of Marlborough, or the Chants de Marlborough, and it's an ecstatic, sort of surrealistic, hallucinatory series of rants against creation that are gorgeous and remind me of what you're doing there. And when he was writing, apparently he declaimed every sentence by hammering on the piano and drove the people downstairs crazy. And he died at a very young age. Look, I'll write it down for you before I go. I think you would really like some of the rhythms of what you're doing and the, you know, exhortation that is reminds you and exquisite. Yeah.
Awesome. So, basically, we're going to conclude the evening. Our next Word Up is November 10th. We're being joined by graphic novelist Neil Gibson, the founder and publisher at Pub Comics. He's a graphic novelist and a publisher, so he'll have lots of cool stuff. And he's coming from the UK, so we have to be online.
Wow, that's further than Toronto.
You know what?
Which is further
It
than
is.
Stainer.
Thank God for Zoom. And I've been on his newsletter for years. I met him at Comic-Con, or not Comic-Con, Fan Expo, and I was pretty sure he's from Toronto in my head when I asked him to come, so.
I think we did, that's where we met, we did panel.
Ridiculous.
Oh, that might have been it, yeah.
And Jeff Sturge is also a graphic novelist and a screenwriter. So they're gonna come and tell us about their inspiration and collaborative messages or methods and processes. So that's November 10th. Thank you, thank Media for hosting our website. Checkenergy.ca for Zoom hosting. City of Barrie for their support. And please sign up for the newsletter at wordupbarrie.com. Good.